This episode of Healthcare Uncut and Unfiltered is sponsored by Connect DME. Connect DME provides over 4,000 products to patients nationwide for below the Medicare allowable rate, which helps your self-funded plan or TPA control costs for your durable medical equipment spend. Connect DME's products range from walking boots and crutches to CPAP machines and diabetic supplies, all shipped directly to the patient's doorstep. They even provide sleep studies taken right in the patient's home. Visit Connect DME online at connectdme.com to find out how they can help your health plan save on medical equipment. That's Connect DME, CONNECT DME.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our 8th episode. Thank you, Brandon. Our 8th episode of Healthcare Uncut Unfiltered. Love being here in Kansas City with AMAC, B-Love, and I cannot tell you how excited that we are to have the godfather of the Free Market Medical Association in the room with us. Dr. Keith Smith gets to join us today. And Dr. Smith, I'm going to tell a story real quick about you that you may not know, and you're the reason I'm in healthcare. You're the 100% reason I got into healthcare, very indirectly. I owned a high school sports magazine for a while, and Alex McDonald was my back cover advertiser when he was with OSOI. And the magazine, the iPad came out, and I realized that print marketing may not be where I want to hang my hat. And Alex heard that I may be making a change and said, come and work in healthcare with me. And I said, nah, I don't know about this whole healthcare thing. He goes, I don't need you to know about it. I just need you to come sell it. And I said, okay, cool. Well, little did I know, Alex had built an imaging model, much like a surgery model that I'm aware of. So you're the reason I got into healthcare.
Well, and Dr. Smith is also the reason I stumbled into free market, not even really knowing. I don't know if you remember this, but I was doing consulting after leaving the orthopedic group. I don't even remember who suggested we go have lunch, but we did. And that's the point you told me. You were dropping your contracts, you're changing the model, you're posting your prices online. And I remember asking you, like, simply how? And you pointed at me and said, because I don't have people like you, meaning administrative levels of bureaucracy and business guys that take money out of the pot. And you said, well, we run it ourselves. And that got me into later forming Health Check, without knowing there was all these other people doing it at the same time. I just thought it was just you and me. You know, I'm like, I'm going to do what he's doing, and then realized quickly that there's a movement happening. So maybe tell us a little bit about, you know, the beginnings of it for you. I know we've heard these stories sometimes, but our listeners may not have. So welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, since we're giving some flowers, I would like to say I am named after you. My parents named me after you, so
that's hilarious.
Thanks for that.
There you go. Enjoy it. Yeah, well, thanks for having me. My the beginnings of the Surgery Center of Oklahoma and kind of our experiment with trying to completely, in a pure way, apply the discipline of the market to this industry really started in about 1990 when Steve Lonte and I both started our private practices. And by that point, we had read a fair amount of economics. We fancied ourselves pretty free market guys. Everything was with our private practices in anesthesia at the big hospital systems was as we had envisioned it. And then in 1992, we just got shaken by the collar when what already seemed a bit heavy-handed and oppressive government became just draconian. The resource-based relative value scale was the effort by the federal government to impose a price on every single service that a physician would offer to a Medicare beneficiary. And every one of those prices was wrong because top-down pricing is a fallacy. It doesn't work. The real pricing emerges from competitive activity with people who who are good-natured competitors. So anyhow, in 1992, what I was paid for the anesthesia service I rendered to a patient having an open heart surgery was about $1,100 with resource-based relative values. Part one, that was cut in half. And unsatisfied, the cuts had been deep enough. In 1993, they cut that in half.
Oh, wow.
So the last open heart surgery for which I provided an anesthetic and was paid by Medicare, it was about a 6-hour difficult procedure. I was paid $285. The last total knee, I provided anesthesia for, and was paid by Medicare. I was paid about $78. And again, I mean, Steve Lonte and I had read enough economics. We knew this wasn't personal. This was a market signal being sent out into the marketplace. And we felt it was incumbent upon us to respond in a rational way, not in an emotional way. I'll admit, at first, I thought dragging my ass to Washington, D.C. and begging for more crumbs was the solution. And I was not alone. The American Society of Anesthesiologists was there. All of the specialty organizations and their lobbyists were there, just begging for more money. And I'd come to the conclusion then the government didn't have any money that it didn't first steal from someone else. And so if I took that money, I was the recipient of stolen property. And so I confessed to having traveled to Washington thinking that might be the solution, but I knew that was wrong. I knew it was wrong. I knew in a hurry. So I just stopped. And I thought, not only can I not accept this money, I can't even file the claims to grant this whole process any legitimacy. So I quit filing claims in 1993, still saw Medicare patients, just treated them free of charge. There'd be an occasional Medicare patient that would pay me, but frankly, Medicare made it easy because, $78 for a total knee after taxes and overhead, I had, a $20 bill or $18, I didn't even care. So, my anesthesia partners were not very happy with me. And I'll talk about this in my talk tomorrow. But I wasn't really trying to change the world. I just wanted to secede from the one that I was in because I knew I was enabling a financial homicide. I was an accessory to a crime.
Culpability.
Yeah, and the hospitals were getting rich and our fees were being cut. But the hospitals had cranes in front of them and building on new wings and buying out competitors and buying physician practices and sponsoring professional sports franchises. And everywhere you look, there's billboards. They were making a killing. But they knew they needed a propaganda message to cover their tracks. And so this poor mouthing strategy that the American Hospital Association came up with was brilliantly executed, and it continues to this day. So, stayed in the hospitals, but knew as an anesthesiologist, to escape this insane system I realized I'd stepped into, that I would actually have to have control of an institution. I was going to have control of a facility because that's where the greatest amount of price gouging was going on. Mm-hmm. So tried and failed. Steve and I don't talk much, but he and I tried together to open the Surgery Center of Oklahoma for 5 years and tried and failed. I don't know how many times. Had a huge group of doctors in the very beginning, and then it splintered apart and resulted in physician-owned facilities all over Oklahoma City. And so the opportunity rose on a hunting trip to buy a dying facility. And so Steve and I were able to really purchase this dying surgery center for a reasonable price. And we were able to assume the lease, so we didn't actually have to buy the building. And Steve and I bought it, just the two of us.
Oh, wow.
We had a group of surgeons that were going to follow us because they liked the anesthesia service we provided. And we went through all the legal hurdles and had them sign all the guarantees. And the day before closing, the bank lawyers looked at the guarantees for the first time and declared them invalid. And so Steve and I each took out a personal loan and bought the operations of surgery center of Oklahoma, knowing that if this doesn't go well, then we're done. I mean, we'll spend the rest of our lives trying to climb out of this, probably unsuccessfully. Right. So we opened. We were wildly successful early on, and that surprised us. But our goals from the very beginning and our mission was never to accept a dime of money from government. And our other goal was patients who came to see us would always know what they were going to pay. We'd never have money discussions once the patients arrived. They would always know before they got there, this is what we expect. So first week we were open, phone rang. A young lady with a breast mass wanted to know how much to have that removed, and we didn't know. I was stoked because this is why we opened, but I had no clue. So I called a surgeon while she was on hold. Roundabout, he told me $500. I thought that was cheap for his fee. I knew it would take 20 or 30 minutes, so on the spot, I had to decide what is an anesthesiologist time like me worth per hour. So divide that by 2, sort of. And then what are the surgical supplies necessary to perform this case? And I called a pathologist.
You exploded a surgery, boom, and labeled everything and gave it a price.
I was creating bundles right there.
That's awesome.
On the spot while she was on hold. And then she's going to want to know if she has cancer. So I called a pathologist for how much. He didn't know. He told me $28. And so I factored that in, told her when I took her off hold is $1,900. And she said, for what? And I said, well, for everything. I mean, she wanted to know how much.
Out the door.
I assumed she meant, cash out the door price. And she said, well, that's funny. The hospital down the street from you, which was one of these poor-mouthing not-for-profits, wanted $19,000 just
we named them on this show, so
we talk about them.
Say whatever you want,
just for the facility. So I'll tell you why I don't make as much fun of them as I used to here in a little bit. But we kind of sharpened our pencils at the end of that surgery and realized we'd made money. I mean, that was a good price. We were satisfied with that. She was really satisfied with it, and she didn't have cancer, so it had a happy ending.
Yay. Good.
So then patient call, how much for tonsillectomy? How much for a hernia? So I do the same thing, just go through this process. What are the components? Well, it's surgery anesthesia facility most of the time. And then the staff would call and say, hey, we've got a patient that has a breast mass. How much? And I'd say, aren't you writing these down? You can quote them on the phone if I figure them out and we're good with it. So over time, this list was created of these, you can quote it over the phone cash prices that were basically on a bunch of Post-it notes. And that's kind of how we got started. And the reason it worked was we discovered early on our all-in, all done, cash out the door price about 80% of the time was less than a patient's in-network deductible at a hospital. And of course, we were out of network because we were blacklisted by all the carriers. So you have these patients that have a $4,500 deductible, and they'd come pay us $2,350 for their carpal tunnel release, and they're better off. And so we were quoting these prices over and over and over and got pretty good at it. I mean, I got to where I developed this time and materials kind of general contractor mindset where, okay, what is involved to do this? And on the fly, I could do it pretty easily. So, we just got busy, had great reputation. Steve and I are both fellowship trained pediatric anesthesia. We'd put all of the people who were CEOs in town. We put all their kids to sleep. I mean, we had a great reputation. We took care of all the Division I athletes except for University of Tulsa. Prices were great. Quality was great. And we outgrew the little place we started in. So we built the facility we're in now debt-free, which was good because that didn't really factor into any kind of prices that we were going to quote going forward. Got even busier. And then the thug at the insurance department really colluding with the carriers and the hospitals came up with an attack on our facility that was devastating. Keep in mind, we had sustained countless legislative maneuvers to put us out of business up to this point. Just think how embarrassing that is to your poor-mouthing message when the unapologetic capitalists down the road are charging 1/10 of what you are and bragging about making a profit. So it was very embarrassing, and we were unhinged in our comments about everything, as we are now and always have been and probably always will be. So they attacked us and they attacked us, and everything backfired on them until this move. They stacked deductibles. They allowed the carriers to allow no out-of-network benefit until the in-network deductible had been met in full. And it killed us. Yeah. It killed us, man. Our waiting room emptied. This is about 2007. 2006, 2007. And I just thought, man, we are cheaper. We're better. There ought to be a light around the block. What in the world is going on, and how do we fix this? So I decided to launch a website and put all of these post-it noted prices out there, hoping I had 3 goals. I wanted people that had sticker shock to better be able to find us, whoever they were. Self-funded, no insurance, high deductible. I wanted to start a price war. I wanted the price gougers to have to contend with what we had listed online. I wanted them to have to respond to the patient that said, hey, it's $4,000 across town, match it or I'm going to Surgery Center of Oklahoma or even out of state. And then my third goal, posting the prices, was to better understand what are the scams at work that make money go under the table, that really don't contribute to the value or the care that is rendered. I would argue all 3 goals have been achieved.
I would too.
Wildly achieved.
You bet.
So I launched the website in 2009, and the first patients that arrived were Canadians. And that was instructive for all those who think Medicare for all is a good idea. These people have coverage, whatever the hell that means. They just don't have access to care that they need. The waiting lines then were bad. They were 2 or 3 years for a hysterectomy, and women bleeding so badly they had to have transfusions. Those waiting lines are almost double that now.
Wow.
So
I was going to ask, is that
it's bad.
Still a piece of your business? I mean,
yes, it hit us hard at first, and then it went away because of the market, because all the
pent-up need.
Well, no, all the facilities on the northern border that were charging them a fortune had to respond to my pricing.
There you go.
And so when their prices fell, people stopped in Wisconsin instead of coming all the way to Oklahoma City. And that was the price war that we had hoped for. But the Canadians came and then they went away. And it's great. That's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. But now they're back. And they're back because they're already complete disconnect between supply and demand in that industry, the completely socialized industry. They are totally dysfunctional. So, we operated on a guy's ankle. He's a 26-year-old competitive rock climber, and he had a loose body in his ankle. And they told him 5 years. 5 years to get
messes
an
with his
ankle scope.
competition, doesn't it?
5 years for an ankle scope. I think we charged him $3,800 all in, and he was in the next week. I mean, he called and he was in, done. Yeah. He's climbing rocks. He's real happy. So, yeah, we saw Canadians. We then saw the uninsured people from the state. He had a lot of repeat players who had already come to see us. Anyone whose children we had anesthetized and operated on, they tended to stay loyal and stay with us. That was kind of the backbone that got us started. And then the uninsured from other states started traveling in. And then I met Jay Kempton. And this is the self-funded world is the mother lode. Mm-hmm. And he asked me, can I buy what you're selling for my clients as their proxy buyer? And I said, absolutely. And he said, well, what is the price? And I said, my price is the same for everyone. Individual, then there's no volume discounts or any of that insanity. If my price is my price. So we started doing business, and his clients just started saving exorbitant amounts. And Jay didn't keep me a secret. Jay
could have.
He could have. I wouldn't have let him, but if he wanted exclusivity, I would not have done it. But that's not Jay.
No.
So next thing I know, Steve Lantier and I are on stage in Vegas at some benefits meeting with 600 Jay Kemptons in the room, and Jay really is the one who arranged it. And so all the third-party administrators in the United States knew about us. And these employers started flying people in and paying all of their travel costs and waiving all of their out-of-pocket. And Jay was actively, and all the other TPAs we worked with were actively redirecting patients to us away from everybody else. Well, that pissed everybody else off.
100%.
And they would make one of two calls or both. They would either call Jay Kempton or Ben Chapman or HealthSmart and scream at them, you're taking these cases from us, why? And Jay or HealthSmart or Ben Chapman, Ameriben, you name it, they would say, well, give us a price list. I mean, that's what Surgery Center of Oklahoma has done. So then people in the Oklahoma City market were kind of drug kicking and screaming to this party. I mean, whether they wanted you or not, because business was walking out the door. The other call that people who were losing business would make ultimately was to me. And, there's the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross grief sort of pattern where
the stages of grief.
Yeah,
style.
The stages where you start with, disbelief, and then you're really angry, then you're really sad, and then you accept it. Well, I got calls all along that spectrum from surgeons, from surgery centers, you name it. But I would tell them, I will teach you how to do this. We didn't post this website to just completely take over. We wanted really to shake things up. And I knew there was enough good guy sort of business out there that everybody could do it. So Jay helped his competitors. I helped my competitors. And the next thing we know, we're surrounded by this collaborative, collegial group of competitors. So we were friendly competitors. So this sort of collaborative nature and this symbiotic thing where, I don't think I can compete with your colonoscopy price. When I get inquiries for that, rather than gear up and do them, why don't I just send those over to your shop? Well, I can't really do cataracts and compete with your price or quality. So rather than gear up and do that, why don't I just send those your way? Should we put in imaging? No, because there's an obvious imaging solution that's high quality. And what does it make any sense to put another an imaging center in town when you have that solution. So this symbiotic, collaborative, beautiful thing really started to happen. And Jay said, I think we ought to make a run at an association where we can meet and we can share ideas and network and just, meet once a year and convince everybody that we're not all insane, and talk to other people who can help us believe we actually are not insane ourselves. So we had our first free market medical association meeting at the Skirvin in downtown Oklahoma City 9 years ago. And we decided if 50 people or less shows up, we'll know this was not a good idea. If 75 show up, we will sit down with a bottle of whiskey like's in front of us here, and we'll talk about whether we're going to do it again, because ultimately renting the hotel, all the expense of it was going to be on Jay and me if we didn't make the nut. Then if 100 come, then we'll know we're on to something. So we had first year, we asked a lot of people to come speak to kind of help us. Corey Cook came, Adam Russo came, my friend Lee Gross, DPC, he came. It was a wonderful show. We had 130 people there at our first one. And so we knew we were on to something. And now this organization is, it's just become huge. I think there's 37 state chapters now, each one of them growing. And now we're in that place where the message needs to be refined. The message needs to be shorter and more scripted, more standardized. And then the well-spoken members of this organization need to be equipped with that and attack. And I think with that strategy, which is what Jay and I are really funding, there's no other way to put it, I think the FMMA is going to tip the scales past the tipping point. And I would say that's on us. I think it's here. So just seeing the energy at this meeting and seeing, the guys at Wellbridge and Indianapolis who have just copycatted exactly what we've done. There's some guys in Denver that are going to do it. There's a guy in Salt Lake that's going to do it. There are people in, the Kelly brothers in Austin, Texas have done it. And it's just, he's starting to pop up all over the place. The other thing that's happened is because of the media attention this movement has received, I receive inquiries all the time for procedures we cannot perform at the Surgery Center of Oklahoma. Well, I've been in Oklahoma City long enough. I know who the good surgeons are that do, brain surgery, you name it, remove cancers, colons, that kind of stuff. And if they work at a hospital that is even remotely cooperative, then I can actually create Post-it note bundles of surgical care episodes that are inpatient cases. Ironically, at facilities that work so hard to put us out of business in the early days. So now our payment clearinghouse, Atlas Billing Company, is actually buying inpatient services on behalf of all of the TPA clients that we work with and individuals from all over the country. And that's a really exciting development, because that demonstrates that these price gouging hospitals are actually in the game. They've got their toe in the water. They're still in the closet, kind of behind the curtain, but they're participating in this movement because their market share will shrink if they don't, and they know that. And so that is one of the most powerful things that's happening.
That's a huge piece for sure.
Yeah, it's a huge thing.
It's kind of the last piece that if we can get them on board, we've almost solved the whole problem. And they're hospital administrators in very discreet moments. People I've sparred with in the past have just let me know in no uncertain terms that this is a topic in their national meetings. This is something they're really watching. I met a guy who is the president of one of the largest hospital systems in the United States, in Nashville, about a year ago. And he said, I'm watching you. I've been watching you. And I know you're right. But he said, none of us are going to do this and participate until the market sends a powerful enough signal to make us do it. And he said, when the self-funded buyers wake up, that's when I think you'll see us come on board. But he said, frankly, that signal is not there yet. And I can't disagree with him. No, he's not wrong.
Self-funded, there are self-funded companies in Oklahoma City that do not buy from me. I mean, Hobby Lobby, Love's, Devon, Paycom, MidFirst Bank. They don't buy from me.
And we've talked to all of them as well.
Yeah. And you know why? It's all the usual answers.
Who you play golf with? Who do you go on? Who you sit on the board with? Who do you know? And it's an administrator somewhere or a CEO or.
Well, and in their defense too, for all their bitching and complaining, medical services for some of those companies is a rounding error. They're not to that place where it hurts enough to entertain change.
I've talked to a couple people that relate to what you've been talking about. So one was a COO of a hospital in Oklahoma City, hospital system. It was my Jay Kenton story from this morning where I was just disputing a bill, just messing with them. Like, why is this charged so much for x-rays? It was $1,600 for a 12-year-old to get 2 knee x-rays, So I played with it. I blew it up on LinkedIn, and I eventually got a call from the COO of the facility because I was tagging the facility every time I'd post the EOBs and all that stuff. So this guy calls me, and he was nice. We had a great conversation. He was, at first he was trying to explain healthcare to me, and I said, no, we're past that. Trust me. But he then tells me that we started talking about transparency and the new laws, and he goes, oh yeah, we're working on that. He said, we just hired a consulting company to analyze our pricing to see if we're in line with other facilities in the area. And I said, why would you do that? He said, what do you mean? We're trying to be transparent and make sure everything. No, I said, you said to be in line with other facilities in the area. Why aren't you spending, I assume you're probably going to spend several $100,000 for this analysis. Why don't you have them analyze what your actual costs are and your overhead and what should things cost based on that? And he was silent for a minute. He said, well, that makes a lot of sense, but that's just not where we're at right now. Meaning that's not what we're required to do. All we're required to do right now is make sure we're not higher than the guy down the road.
We're going to avoid common sense.
Because it's almost like market collusion where they all know we're going to have to publish these transparent prices. So we all better make sure we're around the same super absorbent price. Like we're all going to have prices that are ridiculous, but they're all going to look the same. So we're going to look good. It's ridiculous.
But could there be a better thing happen to the business model? Health check screening, surgery center of Oklahoma.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Wellbridge, it's beautiful. They subscribe to the how do I maximize revenue model. That's their economic model. And the model the FMMA promotes and all its members is how do I maximize the delivery of value, almost in an obscene way, where the buyer feels like they have a kumbaya partner in the deal. And that's different. It feels different. It feels mutually beneficial. It doesn't feel like a hit and run. So it's just it's a different mindset. But I think when the hospitals truly realize that their market share will shrink if they don't jump in this, they'll jump in big. But I'm here to tell you, they've already jumped in. And Atlas Billing Company is paying them as vendors.
Wow.
And you just think about that we are paying as vendors the very hospitals that tried to crush us all along. And I don't know of a better way to really wrap our arms around them and bring them to this party, because we need hospitals. I don't want to crush them. We need them. But we just need them to not bankrupt everyone.
Oh, for sure. I think it's almost like wrestling. It's a hug, but we're pulling them a little, maybe a little against their will. But I think because we're shrinking the number of services that are not available outside their walls, because for years they've overreached their boundaries with services that don't need to even be in a hospital, and so now that's shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking.
Just as insurance has overreached what people ought to be using insurance for. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't be using for colonoscopy or a hernia repair or tonsillectomy. They you shouldn't. I mean,
that was the other thing. So when this same conversation with that COO, when Jay said this morning that front desk girl said, well, it's illegal for us to not. He said the same thing. I said, what if I would pay cash? He said, well, you can't because we have to file your insurance. I said, you don't have to file my insurance. He said, we're legally obligated. Or he said, I don't think he said against the law. So we're legally obligated. I said, not by me. I said, yes, if I give you my card, you have a contract with that carrier that says you have to file that on my behalf if I hand it to you. Right. But I don't have to hand it to you. Right. He said, well, no, I think we're required to file it. I said, well, what if I never gave it? I just did tell you I didn't have insurance. He's like, oh, we have systems that look that up and we find what insurance you have.
Why do you need my card?
Well, but come on. That's illegal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're just cars, aren't we? We're all just cars.
Yeah.
We have to have insurance to drive.
This is a high-level administrator. I think he truly thought he was telling the truth. He thought he was telling the truth. How I don't know, but they're so ingrained in the system they've built that I don't think you step outside the bubble, like they don't understand.
Perfect word.
With all the tomfoolery, if you will, with all the shenanigans that you've had to sift through, and you've been here a long time doing this, I would love to know, have there been any moments or have there been several moments where you've just been like, you know what, I'm about to just be done with this and I'm stepping out. Has there ever been a moment like that in this journey?
Yeah, I mean, opening the Surgery Center of Oklahoma was hard. That was not easy. And whenever anyone approaches me and says, hey, I want a Surgery Center, Oklahoma and Virginia or somewhere, I said, do you really? Yeah. Because you need to know what that means to do that. After we opened, it's been the opposite, because the more of a cesspool that we discover we're competing against, the greater the opportunity is, and it's obvious. So when you begin to actually delve into the mechanics of what happens to the money, and you realize if anybody understands that is so easy to compete against because it's so evil. The claims repricing, where the carriers charge a commission on the extent to which they can achieve a discount, and where that money comes from. And so the carriers are actually incentivized to find the highest prices they can possibly find to start with, because then their commission on that discount is maximized. When you realize the hospitals charge $100 for an aspirin, get paid $20, and claim they lost $80, when you and I know how many bottles of aspirin we can buy for $20, but they need that $80 loss, the fictional loss, to maintain their not-for-profit myth and fiction. And then they ship that off in a bucket to Washington, and Uncle Sam kicks back money through disproportionate share of hospital payments to the extent that they claim these fictitious losses. And then brokers get paid a percentage of claims made at the end of the year as an override that is not reported to the employer. And so they want the plan to have the most disastrous experience it possibly can during the year. And so they want no part of a $3,740 knee arthroscopy at my place. That's a disaster for them. So, Jay says this all the time. The industry is infested with people who profit from the dysfunction. And when you realize how many there are and how many places they siphon revenue, you realize how much easier it really is to compete with. And people say, how do you charge so little? And I said, no. Why do they charge so much is the real question. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about things that are happening that are good. This is the thing that we need to happen. And we talked about that initial meeting at the Skirvin. And there's a guy there that you know pretty well. He now works in the United Healthcare space. Well, listen, this is even better. United Healthcare is now offering reference-based pricing to their clients.
What choice did they have?
Exactly. And one of the guys in that room is leading the charge with United Healthcare to do it the right way. But what's crazy about it is they can't get the brokers to sell it. They can get them to quote it, but they won't. The brokers won't sell it. They've all been trained. They're infantrymen, and they've all gotten their basic training and they're good to go. And they can't. That's the problem they're running up against is they can't.
Cuts are overrides.
That's right. Absolutely. But you'd think as much money as that empire has, they could incentivize them to sell that some way, shape, or form. It just tells me that the move may or may not be genuine. It's a move, but it may or may not be genuine because they're not making it the only move.
And United is a little bit cutting edge. They are paying a no hassle from an invoice. They are paying the online price that the guys at Wellbridge have posted in Indiana. So
they're feeling the pressure.
They are. They have to.
They have to, but United does not have a big presence in Indiana. It's a Blue Cross state. So they got to do something. Mm-hmm. They have to distinguish themselves with the self-funded employers. And they are paying Wellbridge Surgery Center, which is a flagship for FMMA. They're paying them their advertised online website price. So, you have a breaking of ranks like that, and the significance of that has to be acknowledged.
Sure.
And it could snowball. But these kind of things are slow because there's a lot of gooses just get cooked on the way.
Yep. That's crazy.
I have not heard from United Healthcare.
Probably won't. Not in our market.
Probably not. And, you never say never, but I'm pretty sure I can say never. The idea of having a carrier contract at this point, I'm not sure there's a shower hot enough.
An acid bath.
and it's feeding the beast. Mm-hmm. It is denying the independent third-party administrators their opportunity to, make sure this plan is conducted in a proper way.
Well, and it goes against the paradigm shift you had about going to DC. You eliminated all options and said, I'm not going to be culpable. I'm not going to be part of the problem anymore. And if you do it that way, that eliminates that piece that you did. You don't want that. You've stayed true to that. And, at the end of the day, that's where we need to be everywhere. I have one other question I want to ask. I had beers with Jay Kempton not long ago. And I asked him
this is obviously a drinking show.
We like to have a cocktail. Yeah. We were having a beer at American Solera, and I asked him how the situation with you and he arose. And the story to me was fascinating because I never imagined this. And I think I'm I could be possibly tipping the theme for the next FMMA conference because I need to see this acted out on stage. But he said, Dr. Smith and I met with guns drawn. Like, I didn't like him and he didn't like me, but I knew he had something I needed. I needed to figure out how to get it. He said, but we were at odds when we met. He said, I'll let you talk about it.
And he had something I needed.
Sure.
So, I mean, we were both on our guard, but it was pretty apparent early in our first meeting, neither one of us wanted what Matt Ort described this morning as a win-lose relationship.
Right.
It was very clear to me he was a golden rule, mutually beneficial exchange, raised with those kind of biblical principles that we're supposed to be nice to each other and not rip each other off. It was obvious that's who he was. So we both harbored skepticism in the beginning, but I would argue that melted away pretty darn fast because he's a very transparent guy. I'm transparent to a fault. That's actually worked against me in some of our business dealings because I've just been too darn obvious. That will probably never change. But yeah, there was, how do we make this work? And then Jay said, well, we're going to make it work. Do you have a deal? And we shook, and he got in the car and called his staff and said, this is what we're going to do. And I have no idea how we're going to do it, but everybody's going to get together and we're going to figure this out.
So I'm thinking Wild Wild West in Nashville next year. And you and Jay have a square off for the next FMMA conference. You and Jay square off, guns drawn, and reenact the whole.
Well, we're in Oklahoma City next year. That's year 10.
Yeah, that's right. We got to go back to the.
That doesn't mean your theme doesn't work.
Yeah,
Works better.
Yeah, but year 10, we'll be back where we started, and we're already kind of talking about it. John Stossel's probably odds-on favorite for keynote.
Love it.
So, yeah, the idea that the FMMA started 10 years ago and is not just surviving but thriving.
Sure.
I mean, the energy here at this meeting is it's incredible. I'll tell you something that I have thoroughly enjoyed at this meeting. There are so many new faces here. A lot of them have no clue who Jay and I are. And I think
Excuse me, who are you?
Yeah.
I think that's fun.
That's awesome.
And that's wonderful. Because it shouldn't be our association. It belongs, to this whole group. Mm-hmm. And I've gotten a big kick out of that.
It's awesome.
Yeah, that's probably nice for you,
Actually.
actually.
Alex and I, Alex and I have been talking, and we talked with one of my clients today about it for a few minutes, but we were talking about the idea of, and I know that you guys have started almost a curriculum for buyers, almost a way to attack it and way to go, and it's available through the FMMA, but Alex and I were talking about doing something along the lines of what you guys have in this setting for employers. If you've never, ever felt like you could pull the trigger, let us get you all in a room. And I don't want anybody selling anybody anything. We just want to teach. We just want to show. And brokers not allowed. No brokers allowed. I'm cutting myself out. And get employers in a room and show them and say, hey, look, this is what you can do. Adam Russo does it so well. He talks about it in a way that just gets me jazzed about it. That room I wish was full of employers, of the people out there that can buy it. And so I hope, and if there's ever a way a collaboration can be put together, I want to lobby to be on that collaboration. I don't necessarily want to sell anything. I tell people out there that I talk to people every day about self-funding, and I don't tell them they need to buy self-funding from me. I tell them, let me help you and your broker do it. Let us figure out a way to get it done. You just need to do it. And that's the message I kind of got from Adams. Just do it. Dive in. It's not going to be a mountain that's too high to climb or like that. Once you do, you take all the excuses off that you aren't, it's a second leading item on your P&L.
That's sort of
you
baked
change that.
into the culture here. I mean, I know
Yeah.
After attending this for years, I know you've said it. I know Jay said it. You said it on this podcast where I'm willing to pass along the business. There's plenty of business for everybody. If a surgery center called you from Wyoming, I'm sure you'd be happy to have a conversation about how you did it. Here's how you do it. I'm not scared you're taking business from me. We're not competitors. We're all on the same team. Jay's helping other TPAs and other people do what he does. Mark can do the same. I've talked to other imaging centers, even in Oklahoma City, about who to get a hold of, how to get contracts done. It's all about, there's so much business out there that, until everybody's doing it, I guess maybe we got to differentiate and compete in the market. But right now it's better to build everybody else up. I wanted to ask you one last thing. What kind of twofold, but same, related to the same thing, but the future of FMMA, the future of free market medicine in general. I know you mentioned kind of done with the DC lobby, but is there a place for a free market medicine lobby? Is there a place for changing local healthcare laws, guerrilla style or grounds root style? I do think there's going to be more, constant roadblocks as this goes governmentally. There already are, so it's removing them, maybe even not even lobbying for something new, but lobbying for the removal of restrictions or requirements. And then two, just in general, what do you see as, your future or the future for free market medicine? What's going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think about Murray Rothbard, the great Austrian economist, was part of the foundation of the Cato Institute with the idea that it was going to be a free market think tank. And once he got there, the direction changed to promote good government policy. And Rothbard said there's no such thing as good government policy.
I would agree with that.
And so he left the Cato Institute. I would asterisk his comment. There is actually good government policy, but only that which repeals prior government policy. So there are people who have their nose to the ground and the finger on the pulse, watching for any sort of action that would hamstring this movement. And those dangers are always there. Government has a hard time, though, blackjacking you on the back of the head if you don't take their money. That is the leverage. Every law has a clause at the end that refers to non-compliance. I call it the or else clause. So you will do this or else. And then they define what happens to you if you don't comply, typically. Those things are kind of always out there. There are a lot of ERISA lawyers. There are a lot of stop-loss carriers whose money is on this movement. They definitely have boots on the ground. They definitely are watching certain movements and certain things that happen. Just how are they going to attack us? I think we have to distinguish between that, though, monitoring and surveillance, from actually promoting. When you start promoting legislation like mandating price transparency, that's where you get into trouble because the law is passed, and then it goes to these folks called regulators and rule makers. And then they write all these rules that are 180 degrees diametrically opposed to the spirit of the law, which was just passed. Mm-hmm. That's at the national level. That's also at the state level. Mm-hmm. The health department in Oklahoma is no different than any other state, but they typically, when handed a law from the legislature, write rules that are completely counter to the spirit of the law that they were handed. So I think as long as it is surveilling where the attack's coming from and not getting too cocky, thinking, okay, we're organized, we're loaded for bear, we can purchase influence from this well-meaning senator and, they can pass a law that helps us. I think you really have to be careful with that. And then 5 or 10 years from now, I'm a short-term pessimist and a long-term optimist. But that's because I study the free market at its most basic level. I study the writings of the Austrian School of Economics, which I recommend to everyone. Start with Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson, and you'll be hooked, where you'll discover this entire school of economic thought that rocked the world when they targeted the layman. And it's not a bunch of formulas and statistics. It's about human action. And it's mind-blowing, but it's powerful. And it's so powerful, it's not easily defeated. It's hard to argue with cheaper and better. Mm-hmm. That's a tough argument to make. And once you come to grips with the fact that we are on the good guy side of that, long-term optimism, I think, is the only place you can land.
Yeah.
So I'm reluctant to put what does it look like 5 years from now? I'll tell you right now, I didn't think I would be at the White House watching a president sign a executive order mandating price transparency from hospitals and having the economist Larry Van Horn, who crafted it from Vanderbilt, look at me and say, we all know this started with you in Oklahoma City. If you had told me that 5 years ago, I would have worked to have you committed.
Psychiatric help.
This is unbelievable.
This is a wildly powerful movement and concept. And I don't know what it looks like, but I know it's darn sure going the right direction. This meeting is a manifestation of that.
We'll be better off than we were before.
For sure.
What I heard.
As the layman, as the average Joe, I would like to say thank you for what you've done, because it's affected me greatly as the end user in many ways through working with these two. And
you're welcome.
Seriously, thank you.
Yeah.
It's I think the biggest thing about it is I pride myself in being a good judgment of someone's character quickly. And what's cool about this whole conference is there are so many good people here. And what constitutes a good person is somebody who cares about people. And I can see just even through this conversation and through the story, this rigorous, these tens of years that you've been through, you care about people. And as the end user, thank you so much. It means a lot. And it's cool to see that these two probably exist in this capacity because of you. And it's an amazing thing.
I was thinking about that as we were sitting here talking, and I told you you're why I got in healthcare. In college football, they talk about coaching trees. I'm talking about like Hayden Fry's coaching tree is Bob Stoops is part of his coaching tree. I'd like to see a diagram of your healthcare tree.
It's probably a pretty big tree.
Yeah, it is.
Imagine.
Definitely have idols who really impacted me and affected me. Don Garrett and Richard Allgood were a couple of surgeons.
Did you always practice in Oklahoma? Or
I did my residency training fellowship in Arkansas.
Okay.
Jim Porter, guy that trained Steve Lantier and me, huge impact. Paul Bickett, the guy that kind of convinced me to go into anesthesia. I've come across some people very Norman Imes, most brilliant pulmonologist I think I could even imagine, one of the most brilliant men I've ever known. They're people that definitely had just huge kind of mentoring impacts on me. It's just
I'm glad they did.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
We'd be honored if you would try our Infinity Decanter.
Yeah,
this
speaking
is
of-
our first
speaking
time
of-
to try it
yeah.
also.
Let's do it.
And you're the perfect person to try this. Have you explained what these?
Speaking of powerful, the whole bourbon
Well, the
culture.
cocktail reception's 20 minutes or 40 minutes away. So
Yeah,
we'll
we
just,
gotta prime the
we'll
pump.
just do a pregame.
Yeah, we'll do a little neat pour here real quick. But this has got a good mix of about 7 whiskeys from 1792 sweet wheat to EHT small batch to Peerless double oaked. There's some good blends.
Weller
of whiskeys.
Antique 107.
Weller Antique 107. This one? I pour the least in that.
Old Forester King Ranch.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, this is a treat.
Yeah, Dr. Smith, we're glad you're on. We're excited to be part of the FMMA. Cheers to your 5-year outlook. I am excited. Long-term optimism. We'll be here as long as you're here, and hopefully after.
Love it. Thank you, guys.